The night started like any other for Big Shaq, the viral sensation known for his humor, larger-than-life personality, and undeniable energy. He was out, minding his business, chatting with fans, and just enjoying the vibe. But what happened next? Nobody saw coming. Out of nowhere, a woman stormed up to him, her face twisted with anger. She started shouting, her words laced with something ugly, something that made everyone around stop and stare. The energy in the air shifted. At first, Shaq thought maybe it was just another hater looking for attention. But then, things escalated. Before anyone could react, she did the unthinkable. Right there, in front of everyone, she spat at him. The crowd gasped. A moment of silence hung heavy in the air. People couldn't believe what they just witnessed. Disgust, shock, and anger spread through the onlookers. Cameras were already rolling. Big Shaq stood there, his face unreadable. His usual quick wit, his playful nature, it all seemed to freeze for just a second. But that second felt like an eternity. What was he going to do? Would he react? Would he walk away? Would someone else step in? The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. And then it happened. Something no one expected. Something that would have the entire internet talking for days. Stay locked in, because what unfolds next is a moment you won't believe. Keep watching, because this is about to take a turn that nobody saw coming. For a split second, everything seemed frozen. The people watching, the noise of the street, even Big Shaq himself. It was like the whole world hit pause. The woman's face was twisted in some mix of anger and satisfaction, like she had done something she thought she'd get away with. But what she didn't expect was the reaction of the crowd. Murmurs turned into whispers, whispers into full-blown outrage. People around started pulling out their phones, recording every second. Some gasped in shock, others shook their heads in disbelief. A man in the back shouted, "Did she really just do that?" A woman nearby covered her mouth, eyes wide. No one could understand why she would take things that far. Big Shaq, still standing there, wiped his face slowly. He wasn't laughing. This wasn't one of his usual funny moments. His energy was different, collected, but serious. You could see it in his eyes. He wasn't the type to start drama, but even the calmest people have their limits. And then, just when people thought they knew what was about to happen next, a voice broke through the tension. "Oi, that's enough," someone shouted from the side. A man pushed his way through the crowd, his face full of anger, but not at Big Shaq. His eyes were locked on the woman, and he was coming straight for her. The woman's smirk faded instantly. She took a step back, suddenly realizing that maybe, just maybe, she had gone too far. But it was too late. The cameras were rolling. The internet was watching. And what happened next was something nobody would ever forget. The man pushing through the crowd looked furious, his steps quick and determined. People moved aside, sensing the intensity in his stride. His eyes were locked on the woman, but there was something else in his expression: disgust, frustration, and maybe even disbelief. It was clear he had seen enough. The woman's confidence wavered. Just moments ago, she was bold, loud, unshaken. Now her body tensed, her fingers gripping the strap of her bag like she was ready to leave, but she was trapped. The crowd had formed a loose circle, their eyes glued to the unfolding scene. Some people whispered to each other, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Others stood in silence, waiting to see what Big Shaq would do. Shaq still hadn't moved much. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes told a different story. He was thinking, calculating, reading the room. He wasn't one to be disrespected, but he also wasn't the type to react out of anger. That's what made the moment so intense. What was going through his mind? What was he about to say? The man who had stepped in was now standing between Shaq and the woman. His voice cut through the heavy silence. "What is wrong with you?" he snapped, shaking his head at her. "You think that's okay?" The woman opened her mouth like she had something to say, but no words came out. For the first time since she walked into the scene, she looked unsure of herself. She glanced at the crowd, at the cameras, at the dozens of eyes locked onto her. The power she thought she had, it was slipping. But just as it seemed like things were about to take a turn, something unexpected happened, something that changed everything. The air was thick with tension. Every single person in that crowd could feel it. The woman who had started this whole mess with her reckless actions was now shifting uncomfortably. Her confidence had cracked, but there was still something in her eyes, like she was trying to figure out a way to flip the situation in her favor. But she couldn't. Not this time. Too many people had seen what happened. Too many cameras were rolling. Big Shaq finally moved. He took a slow step forward, his presence commanding. His face was calm, but there was a weight to it, a seriousness that made the crowd hold their breath. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't brushing it off. This wasn't a joke. He looked the woman in the eye, and for the first time she looked away. The man who had stepped in, still standing between them, turned slightly to Shaq as if waiting for him to say something. The entire crowd was waiting too. But before Shaq could speak, a voice from the side cut through the silence. "Hey, what's going on here?" A security guard had stepped in, his eyes scanning the situation. More people had gathered now, curious strangers stopping to see what the commotion was about. The woman immediately turned toward the security guard, like she had been given an escape route. "This man, she started, but she hesitated. She didn't have a story to spin, not one that would make sense, not one that people would believe. The security guard looked at her, then at Shaq, then at the dozens of phones pointed at them. He seemed to realize this was already bigger than anything he could control. And then, in that moment, something happened that no one saw coming, something that would change everything in an instant. Before the security guard could say another word, a new voice cut through the crowd, sharp, direct, and impossible to ignore. "I saw everything." A woman stepped forward, phone still in hand, her expression serious. She wasn't just another bystander. She had captured the entire incident from the very beginning. The moment the woman spat, the shock on Big Shaq's face, the reactions of the crowd, it was all recorded. The crowd shifted, murmuring as more people turned their attention to her. The tension thickened. The woman who started this all stiffened, her eyes darting between the security guard, the man standing in front of her, and now this new witness. She must have realized there was no way out. But instead of backing down, she did something no one expected. She doubled down. "That's not what happened," she blurted out, shaking her head quickly. Her voice was uneven, her confidence cracking with every second. You're twisting this." A wave of disbelief rolled through the crowd. People whispered to each other, shaking their heads. The witness, unshaken, simply held up her phone. "It's all here," she said calmly. "You can try to lie, but the truth is already out there." Big Shaq hadn't spoken yet, but his expression said it all. He didn't need to argue. He didn't need to defend himself. The facts were right there, and the world was already watching. The security guard hesitated. It was clear he wasn't sure what to do. More people in the crowd started calling out, demanding action. And then, just as the pressure reached its peak, something happened that no one saw coming, something that would turn this entire situation on its head. The tension had reached its peak. The woman's face was pale now, her confidence completely shattered. She could feel the weight of the crowd's eyes on her, the judgment, the disbelief. The security guard glanced between her, Big Shaq, and the witness holding the phone. He knew there was no avoiding this. Too many people had seen the truth. And then, just as it seemed like things couldn't get any more intense, Big Shaq finally spoke. His voice was calm but firm. "You don't have to lie," he said, looking directly at the woman. "You did what you did, and now you're trying to run from it." The crowd fell silent, hanging on to every word. The woman opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, but nothing came out. There was no defense, no excuse. She turned to the security guard, but even he wasn't buying it anymore. The energy had shifted completely. Then something unexpected happened. The woman's shoulders slumped. She exhaled sharply, looking down at the ground. "I messed up," she muttered, barely audible. But the crowd heard it. Some gasped. Others exchanged looks of surprise. Nobody expected her to admit it. Big Shaq gave a small nod, like he had already moved past it. He didn't need revenge. He didn't need to make a scene. The truth had already won. But just when it seemed like the situation had finally settled, the witness with the phone gasped. "Wait, my video. It's already online," she said, staring at her screen. "And it's blowing up." The woman's eyes widened in panic. The moment she tried to hide, the moment she thought she could control, it was already out there. And now, the whole world was watching. The woman's face drained of color as she stared at the phone screen. It was too late. The video was spreading faster than she could even think of a way to explain herself. The crowd around her started checking their own phones, whispers turning into quiet gasps. People were already reacting, already commenting. The internet had taken over. Big Shaq glanced at the scene unfolding before him, but he wasn't focused on the chaos. He wasn't here for drama, never had been. With a deep breath, he looked at the woman one last time, then turned to leave. No need to waste any more energy on something that wasn't worth it. The security guard stepped forward, clearing his throat. "All right, let's keep it moving," he said, signaling for the crowd to disperse. People hesitated for a moment, still buzzing from everything that had happened, but slowly the circle broke apart. Some people stayed behind, still watching the woman, still shaking their heads in disbelief, but for most the moment was over. As Big Shaq walked away, a few fans ran up to him, showing support, shaking his hand, telling him they had his back. He smiled, nodding, keeping it cool. He knew situations like this didn't define him. The woman stood frozen, still gripping her phone, still watching as the video continued to spread. Whatever story she thought she could control was now out of her hands. And maybe, just maybe, she was starting to realize that actions have consequences. As Shaq disappeared into the night, the moment left its mark, not just on those who were there, but on everyone watching from their screens, because in the end, the truth always comes out.